interested. Now we're going to talk about the 5 worst upgrades I did to my Jeep and things that I regret having spent money on. And so we're gonna start. The hell are we gonna start with?
Your engine management.
Oh yeah, we're gonna start with engine management. So lots of people out there get a cold air intake, get a bored out throttle body, a throttle body spacer, a tuner, a chip. I went through all of them. I mean, I literally, at one point I had stacked tuners and the throttle body board with the throttle body spacer and all that stuff, and all it really did was cause my check engine light to come on constantly. Didn't really seem to give me much more power, and it ultimately burned up my catalytic converters. Because I live here in California, I had to spend $1,000 to get new catalytic converters put on my Jeep. And so I think the 4-liter, that inline 6 4-liter engine is what it is. There's not a lot you're going to do to give it more power. If you want to put a turbo on it, be prepared to deal with the heat issues. You're going to get more power, but you better be running at high speed, because when you're rock crawling, turbos build heat. Same thing with superchargers. They're great for power. I might actually do it myself one day, see how it goes, but be prepared to do all the things that are necessary to keep your vehicle cool when you're doing those upgrades. But all those sort of gimmicky engine upgrades, I tried them all. I've got them in a box. I offered to give them to my buddy Matt, who's filming here today, to put on his Jeep. After I explained to him what went on, he just kind of went, "You can keep that stuff." So that was my sort of one of my worst, we'll call it waste of money projects. The second one I want to talk about, we're going to go over here to Matt's Jeep to sort of demonstrate. The stock Jeep TJs, whether it's a Rubicon, doesn't matter what it is, it comes with this funky 5 on 4.5 bolt pattern. And so the mistake I made was, when I first got my Jeep, I went out and of course did what everybody did. I did something right. I bought a long arm lift kit, but then I bought a bunch of rims with this 5 on 4.5 bolt pattern. And you don't realize until you've invested like $2,500 in wheels and tires in that 5 on 4.5 bolt pattern, and then you want to do an upgrade, about what a bad decision it is, because there is no aftermarket support at all for better, really truly better axles, or axles that have lock-in, lock-out hubs, or axles that are more heavy duty that come in at 5 on 4.5. Now, what are you going to do about that? What I've always done, or what I ended up doing, is, first of all, I had to throw my old rims away because I couldn't upgrade if I kept them. And so the right thing to do is to go on a 5 on 5.5 bolt pattern. It's the old CJ pattern. It's also used on Ford Broncos, Ford trucks, ton of applications. International Scouts used it. 5 on 5.5 is a great bolt pattern. It's big enough that you can fit a real locking hub on that wheel. You can adapt a 14 bolt to 5 on 4.5 or 5 on 5.5. You can adapt a Dana 60 to 5 on 5.5. You can get any kind of super upgrade. And like the guys who are really into the king of the hammers and the big races, they generally run like that 5 on 5.5 bolt pattern. The other thing I'll say is, don't stick yourself with a 15-inch wheel or a 16-inch wheel. Go to a 17-inch wheel. You're just when you keep those smaller wheels, you can't upgrade your brakes, which is going to be a big deal as you go to bigger tires. When you're up to like 33s, you're fine. 35s, your brakes get a little sketchy. You start getting on 37s and you're on a stock brake because you can't get a bigger brake inside your 15-inch rim that you have. That's a 5 on 4.5 bolt pattern, and you're not going to be having a fun time when it comes to stop. The time comes to stop. So do yourself a favor right off the bat. Buy some of those little adapters. Adapt from 5 on 4.5 to 5 on 5.5. It'll give you a little wider stance. It'll also, make sure you torque them down good. They don't have the best reputation, these spacers, but that's because people don't torque them down right. I ran them for years, never had a problem. And adapt it to a 5 on 5. Then buy your cool rims and get your rims in at least a 17-inch. I think it's a standard. Those are two mistakes. I mean, if I'd have bought 17-inch rims right off the bat, I'd probably still be running them today. Bam. Okay, so Matt, it's my third. All right, number 3. So this is the third big mistake I made. So I've been through a lot of axles on this vehicle. I started with the stock Dana 44s, and my personal rear Dana 44 broke in Moab, chipped a ring and pinion, knew it wasn't right, drove it all the way back to California. By the time I got here, it was toast, and I knew it was time to use that as my excuse to upgrade to a better axle. So thinking I was doing the right thing. I looked at all these magazines and race guys, and they were all running spider tracks with the Ford 9-inch style center, and a true high 9, super high drive lines going to be out of the way. And I thought, man, that's the way to go. And I made a couple of mistakes on that axle. One, I bought it. Two, I bought it in semi-float instead of a full float. Now, full float is a whole subject unto itself about why you need it, but if you ever upgrade your axle, and your rear axle in particular, or your front axle is going to be a full float always, well, not always on a stock Jeep, but get yourself a full float axle, because that's really what you need to do. The mistake that I had with that particular axle was I tried to adapt something that worked really well at King of the Hammers, in rock crawling competitions, lightweight, really strong, but it was just not a good idea for the street. And the reason for that is because it's a reverse rotation axle, and you're running it backwards, and the little pinion bearing in there gets, when you're running on the street, it gets hot, it wears it out. I'll be honest, I think I broke that axle more than I broke my Dana 44. I bent the housing, I bent one of the flanges on a 1 ton, 1.25 inches, whatever it is, big, super thick axle. Bent the flange on it one time, went through 3 different pinion bearings on that true high 9 that I had to have rebuilt, and just what a waste of money. I mean, I really threw a lot of, I might have thrown $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 away in that investment alone. My 14 bolt, I might have, I don't know, $1,800 in my 14 bolt total, and it's a way better axle. Works great on the street, works great on the trail. It's a little bit low and it drags. That's why I have a winch and drag myself off the rock, and I'm looking goofy every now and then. But that was the single biggest waste of money that I did on my Jeep when I was upgrading, was to try to copy what the racers do, thinking that was the right thing, when really think through what you're going to do with your Jeep. If you're going to be like me and drive it on the street some, make sure you get an axle that's appropriate for the street. Okay, so now we're on to 4 worst things I did, and some of this is unavoidable, but as much as you can, try to stay away from adding a bunch of weight to your Jeep. I mean, when I looked at my Jeep, I used to have a different front bumper, and it weighed, I thought it was like super cool. The thing weighed like 300 pounds, solid steel. Paid a ton of money for it. I've got all these nice steel skid plates. I bought these like super hardcore steel plates here. I've got extra armor here. These are aluminum, at least that's the right thing to do. Got these from Genrite, these nice aluminum ones, and I got this. This is the bumper I originally put on my Jeep years and years ago, and it probably weighs 250 or 300 pounds. If I had to do over again, I'd get something aluminum. Try to keep your Jeep light as possible. I mean, really think that through and spend the extra money as you're doing your build-up. If you already have the bumpers and whatnot, do it, but try to be really weight conscious. My Jeep tops the scales now somewhere about 4,900 pounds, close to 5,000 pounds, and over 5,000 when I'm sitting in it. And that's a lot of weight. And might explain, I run heavy, I carry a lot of tools, so I have to have the 14 bolt, so I'm just pulling all that extra weight. So keeping your Jeep light from the beginning, go with the aluminum side running boards and stuff. Go with something a little bit lighter on the rear tire carrier. Go with the lighter, cheaper, or sometimes lighter is more expensive, bumper up front, and try to keep that weight down as much as possible. For me, I like both Genrite and Metal Cloak stuff. When I bought mine, this was the Genrite stuff, and they had these cool wraparound axles, which I like. It's kept me street legal. This is all aluminum. That was really cool. Unfortunately, when I bought my Metal Cloak fenders, they only made them in steel. Probably not going to go back and buy aluminum ones if they make them now, and I think they do. Love these fenders, great clearance, good stuff, but once again, just extra weight. So, mistakes that I've made along the way, just making my Jeep too heavy. Bam, and away we go. Okay, so we'll talk about the last sort of big mistake I made with my Jeep that's cost me a bunch of money, and that was ultimately not doing a really good job at designing my suspension. So, it's a little more advanced stuff. We're talking about, I built arms in the front. One of the mistakes I made was I used a radius arm front suspension with coilovers. And what I learned was that these coilovers have a lot of downward force, even if you're using a fairly lightweight spring. And so as I would start to climb hills, I'd go to Moab, this front suspension, you know, it would be like here, and every time you get on a hill, because as you go up, the weight on the front of the Jeep gets a little bit lighter, so there's not as much weight on those springs, and they go whoop. And so when you're sitting in the passenger seat, you feel like every time you climb a hill, you're going over backwards. That has to do with some stuff called anti-squat and anti-dive, and how you tune your suspension and where your springs are set up and how much spring weight you put in. So I'm doing a better job the second time around. I'm going to go to a 3-link suspension instead of a radius arm. So that was the mistake I made kind of on the front, or at least the way I look at it, it was a mistake, because now I'm rebuilding the whole thing and going to a different type of suspension with the goal of having it when it's climbing better. But I also want to have this Jeep set up where I can kind of run at a little bit higher speed and keep up with the wife and her little Razor. On the rear, I made a couple of mistakes as well on my first go around, and not as expensive. If you look down here, when I first did my suspension on the rear, this is where I mounted this lower arm. I did it, but it was really cool. The good thing I did was I did a triangulated upper 4-link suspension, which was really cool. That was good. What I didn't do was I didn't really calculate anti-squat very well and understand what it meant, and so I had my arms mounted up here. I had these brackets welded on. I guess I could have just went to this here, which is what I should have done, and what I ultimately did was just bolt it straight up to my old trusty Rubicon Express skid plate. But I went up here because I wanted the arms to be equal length and a whole bunch of other stuff, and well, that didn't work out at all. This thing experienced tremendous squat in the rear because of that. I had to go to much stiffer springs. I had a number of issues. I ended up going to longer arms, raising the inner arms up. So, you know, and some of that's not so much a really expensive mistake on the rear. It's just sort of learning how to build suspensions and get them to be right and to understand what these anti-squat and anti-dive values mean in the real world. And there'll be some videos later when I get my front suspension built, but we're going to actually take these arms off and adjust them up and down and climb hills and go out in the desert and see, you know, what really what works well in the real world for this kind of stuff. So some mistakes I made in my own custom fabrication building of my suspension, and going to fix that. And hopefully there'll be some more videos, and soon you'll see me out on the trail with my new Dana 60 up front, and we'll test that stuff out and teach you guys some more about how TJ suspensions work.